help, my ocean is turning red. Does that sound familiar? If you're, running a business, leading a nonprofit, maybe even working in government, that feeling of margins getting squeezed, competition, just feeling like this endless, bloody fight.
Exhausting, yeah.
Everything turning into a commodity, costs just going up and up. It's the reality nobody really wants, right? Where tough choices feel like they're just around the corner.
It's a tough spot.
Yeah.
And it's where so many organizations, find themselves stuck today. That image, the red ocean, it really captures that feeling of cutthroat competition.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And that struggle, that red ocean reality, is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We're digging into the source material that offers, a different way forward.
Right. The book Blue Ocean Strategy by Kim and Renée Mauborgne, we're focusing mainly on the preface and the first couple of chapters to really get the foundations.
Yeah, the core ideas.
Our mission here, really, is to pull out the key insights, the tools, the frameworks they lay out, to understand how organizations can maybe systematically step away from that intense, often profitless competition.
And maybe even more excitingly,
Create entirely new market space, uncontested space. The book makes a strong case that this isn't just, luck or a random genius, it's an approach.
a systematic approach you can actually learn.
Exactly.
So consider this deep dive your shortcut to getting informed on this really powerful strategic way of thinking. We're going to explore that key difference between competing in those existing crowded markets, the red oceans,
The bloody ones.
and creating totally new markets, the blue oceans. We'll get into why creating these blue oceans seems more important now than ever.
And the logic behind it, this idea they call value innovation.
Right, value innovation. And we'll introduce some of the practical tools the book offers to actually make this happen, not by accident, but, like you said, through a deliberate process.
Okay, so let's really unpack that metaphor first. Red oceans, what are they? They're basically all the industries that exist right now.
The known market space.
Exactly. The boundaries are defined, the rules of competition are pretty well understood, and companies are just fighting like crazy over the existing demand.
Which leads to
Often price wars, products becoming almost indistinguishable, and yeah, like you said, shrinking profits. It's often a zero-sum game, or even worse.
and blue oceans are the complete opposite.
Totally. This is the untapped market space, unknown territory. It's about creating demand, not fighting over it, opening up pathways to, potentially huge profitable growth.
Because the competition is different.
It's almost irrelevant because you're the one setting the rules. You're creating the new game.
Now, the book isn't saying ignore the red oceans entirely, right? Competing there is still necessary for many.
No, absolutely not. Red oceans still matter. You often have to manage your existing business. But the argument is that only competing in red oceans, just trying to be incrementally better, isn't enough anymore for sustained high performance.
Especially when
Globally, in so many sectors, supply is just outstripping demand. There's more stuff than people currently want or need within the existing boundaries.
And it's interesting, this idea isn't actually new, is it? Creating new markets.
Not at all. Blue oceans have always been created throughout history. Think about the automobile. Before that, people relied on horses and carriages.
Or commercial aviation. Or more recently, e-commerce, cell phones.
Exactly. The authors make the point that the market universe isn't static. It's constantly being expanded by companies and entrepreneurs who look beyond what currently exists.
And the numbers they cite really back this up. There was a study.
Yeah, a study of 108 business launches. Get this, 86% of them were basically red ocean moves, incremental improvements, line extensions, fighting harder in the known space.
Okay, the vast majority. But what about the results?
Well, those 86% of launches accounted for only 62% of the total revenues generated.
Okay.
And only 39% of the total profits.
Wow. So most of the effort, most of the launches, generated less than half the profit.
Precisely. Now, the other 14% of launches, those were the blue ocean creations, aimed at creating new market space.
A much smaller number.
Much smaller. But they generated 38% of the total revenue.
Almost catching up to the red ocean launches.
And a whopping 61% of the total profits.
61%. That's incredible. The payoff is just disproportionately huge.
It really highlights the potential, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the book argues that the imperative to find these blue oceans is actually growing. It's becoming more critical now.
Why now? What's changed?
Several big forces are converging. One is just the sheer acceleration of technology. Productivity gains mean that, like we said, supply exceeds demand in more and more industries.
Okay, that makes sense. More stuff available.
Then add globalization, trade barriers are lower, information travels instantly.
So everyone knows everyone else's prices and features.
Right. Niche markets get harder to protect. Competition just intensifies everywhere.
And that leads to commoditization, right?
Yeah.
Everything starts to look the same.
Exactly. And when products seem similar, what's the easiest lever to pull? Price. So you get price wars, shrinking margins. The book points to data showing brands are perceived as more similar, pushing people towards price-based choices.
Plus, there's a rising need in certain sectors, isn't there? Like healthcare, education.
Yeah, critical sectors often under budget pressure, they need creative solutions, not just slightly better versions of the same expensive models. The old more for more strategies don't work.
And you can't hide anymore either, with social media, blogs.
The public megaphone. Try to pass off a Me Too product, forget it. You get called out instantly, globally. You need something genuinely different to stand out.
That's a great point. What else?
Well, think about where future growth is expected. Big emerging markets, China, India, Brazil, huge populations.
But lower income per person, generally.
Right. So you can't just offer a high-end, expensive product. You often need affordability and differentiation. You need to deliver value in a new way. It breaks the old trade-off.
And finally, it's just easier to be a global competitor now, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Building a website, crowdfunding, free marketing tools. Almost anyone, anywhere can jump into the global marketplace, which, again, just turns up the heat in those red oceans.
Okay, so the message is loud and clear. Just fighting harder in the existing market. It's probably not the winning strategy long-term for many.
It's becoming less and less sustainable for achieving real high performance. We need a different way to think about strategy.
So if competing harder isn't the answer, what is? How do you actually find or create these blue oceans?
That brings us to the absolute core logic of the book. It's called value innovation.
Value innovation.
This is the cornerstone. It's fundamentally different from just focusing on beating the competition. The goal isn't stealing customers from rivals.
Making them irrelevant.
Exactly. By creating a massive leap in value for buyers while also achieving a significant improvement in your own cost structure or efficiency, it's value for the customer and value for the company.
Ah, okay, so that's where that counterintuitive idea comes in. Breaking the value-cost trade-off.
Yes. Conventional strategy often presents it as a choice. Are you going to differentiate, offer more value, but have higher costs? Or are you going for low cost, maybe sacrificing some value?
The classic trade-off.
Value innovation says no, you have to pursue both, differentiation and low cost, simultaneously.
That sounds really difficult. How do you even do that?
Well, the book uses Cirque du Soleil as the prime example to illustrate how it works. Think about the situation they entered.
The traditional circus industry. Declining, right?
Totally declining. Audiences, especially families, were shrinking. There was growing unease about using animals.
And tons of competition from other entertainment. Movies, sports, concerts.
Huge competition. Plus, the existing big players like Ringling Bros set the standard, and smaller circuses just tried to offer a scaled-down, cheaper version, a classic red ocean scenario.
So traditional analysis would say, stay away.
Absolutely. But Cirque du Soleil didn't try to compete head-to-head. They didn't aim to be a better traditional circus.
They did something completely different.
They created a whole new market space. They targeted adults, corporate clients, people who probably haven't thought about the circus in years, if ever. And these people were willing to pay a much higher price, like theater prices.
Their first shows were even called We Reinvent the Circus.
Yeah.
Pretty clear signal.
Right. So how did they pull off this value innovation? How did they get differentiation and lower costs?
Okay, break it down.
They looked at the factors the traditional circus industry competed on, the things everyone took for granted, and they asked, what can we eliminate?
Eliminate? Okay, like the animals.
Exactly. Animal acts were expensive, controversial, gone. Star performers, also expensive, maybe didn't have the same draw relative to their cost anymore. Eliminated. Multiple rings, logistically complex, gone. Annoying aisle concession sales, reduced or eliminated.
Okay, getting rid of those things must have slashed their costs compared to Ringling Bros.
Dramatically.
Right.
But just cutting costs makes you cheaper, not necessarily better or different in a valuable way. You could just end up being a stripped-down, worse circus.
Right, that's not a blue ocean.
Yeah.
So the innovation part?
That came from asking, what can we raise well above the industry standard, and what can we create that the industry has never offered?
Okay, raise and create.
They kept the circus tent, but raised it into this glamorous, beautiful venue, more like theater. They kept clowns, but raised the humor to be more sophisticated. Then they created totally new elements, borrowed heavily from theater.
Like having a theme, a storyline.
Yes, a narrative thread, artistic music and dance that were integral, not just background noise. And they created the concept of multiple productions running at the same time, like Broadway shows, each with its own unique character.
Ah, so by adding those theatrical elements, they lifted the value proposition way up, appealing to that new adult audience?
Precisely. And they could then price against theater much higher than a traditional circus. So they got differentiation through unique value and a lower cost structure by eliminating expensive traditional elements. That's value innovation.
That makes so much sense when you see it laid out like that.
Yeah.
But still, how do you find your Cirque du Soleil idea? It can't just be waiting for lightning to strike, right?
No, and that's a key point of the book. It argues this isn't just about random creativity. It's about a systematic process. We have lots of tools for competing in red oceans, but fewer for finding blue ones. So they offer frameworks.
Okay, what's the first big tool they give us?
It's called the strategy canvas. This is really fundamental. It serves two purposes. It's a diagnostic tool, and it's an action framework.
Diagnostic, meaning it shows you where things stand now.
Exactly. You map out the current state of play. Along the bottom, the horizontal axis, you list the key factors that the industry currently competes on and invests in.
Okay, the things everyone focuses on.
And on the vertical axis, you plot the offering level that buyers receive for each factor. Higher means more investment, a higher level of offering on that specific factor.
So you plot different companies or maybe groups of companies.
And you get their value curves or strategic profiles. It's a visual representation of their strategy.
Okay, what does it typically show in a red ocean?
Often, convergence. The book uses the U.S. wine industry as an example. Fierce competition, lots of brands, price pressure, but overall demand wasn't really growing.
Right.
They identified about 7 key factors everyone competed on. Things like price, using fancy wine terminology, marketing spend, aging quality, vineyard prestige, the complexity of the taste, the range of wines offered.
Okay, the usual suspects for wine.
And when they plotted the value curves for, say, premium wineries versus budget wineries...
They look totally different.
Well, yes and no. Premium wines scored high on most factors. Budget wines scored low. But the shape of their curves was remarkably similar. They were competing on the same factors, just playing the game at different price points.
So they were different, but kind of different in the same predictable way, still playing by the same rules.
Exactly. That convergence is a telltale sign of a red ocean. And the insight here is crucial. If your value curve looks like everyone else's, you're stuck.
And just asking current customers what they want probably won't help you break out.
Usually not. Customers tend to ask for more of what they already know, maybe just cheaper, more for less within the existing framework. That rarely leads to a blue ocean.
So you need to change the framework itself.
Yes. You need to shift your focus from competitors and current customers inside the industry and look outside to alternatives to non-customers. You need to redefine the problem the industry is trying to solve.
Okay, which naturally leads to the next tool, the one for actually doing that redefining.
The 4 actions framework. This is designed to help you systematically reconstruct buyer value elements and create that new divergent value curve.
It challenges the existing logic.
Directly. And it helps break that value cost trade-off we talked about. It does this by posing 4 specific questions about the industry's factors of competition.
Okay, what are the 4 questions?
First, eliminate. Which factors that the industry has long competed on should be eliminated entirely? Maybe they don't add value anymore, or customers don't care as much?
Get rid of them. Okay.
Second, reduce. Which factors should be reduced well below the industry standard? Perhaps they've been over-delivered on in the competitive race, adding cost without proportional value.
Scale back.
Third, raise. Which factors should be raised well above the industry standard? Where are the compromises the industry forces on customers that you can solve?
And
Fourth, create. Which factors should be created that the industry has never offered? What new sources of value can you introduce?
Eliminate, reduce, raise, create.
Okay, and the real power comes from using all 4. Eliminate and reduce are key for lowering your cost structure.
Makes sense. Less stuff, less cost.
Raise and create are how you lift buyer value and create new demand.
And you mentioned the eliminate and create actions are particularly important.
Yes, because they're the ones that most directly challenge the status quo and change the factors of competition themselves, making the old rules less relevant.
Let's apply this to that wine example again.
Yeah.
Yellowtail. They didn't just look at other wineries.
No. They looked across alternatives. Beer, cocktails, ready-to-drink beverages, things people drank instead of wine. And they looked at non-customers. The huge group of American adults who found wine intimidating, confusing, maybe just didn't like the taste profiles.
So they weren't trying to steal market share from existing premium or budget wines.
They were trying to convert beer drinkers and cocktail drinkers. They redefined the goal: make wine fun, simple, approachable, easy to drink for the masses.
Okay, so applying the 4 actions, what did they eliminate or reduce?
They eliminated or drastically reduced reliance on things like complex wine terminology, traditional marketing initially, the focus on aging potential and vineyard prestige, the actual complexity of the wine's taste profile.
And the range. They started with just 2, right? Chardonnay and Shiraz.
Exactly. Reducing the range massively simplified their business model. Lower inventory, lower costs, faster turnover.
Okay, that covers eliminate and reduce, driving costs down. What about raise and create?
They created a factor they called easy drinking, a specific taste profile, less tannic, fruitier, slightly sweeter, immediately accessible to palates used to softer drinks. They created ease of selection, simple, vibrant label, the kangaroo icon, easy to understand choices, strong retailer support.
And they raised the fun factor.
Yeah, they raised the sense of fun and adventure using that approachable, laid-back Australian personality in their branding.
So putting it all together, eliminate, reduce, raise, create. They ended up with a completely different value curve.
Totally divergent from traditional wineries. They
Right.
didn't just steal share, they dramatically grew the entire wine market by bringing in millions of new drinkers. Priced above budget, below premium, fastest growing brand in U.S. history at the time, a massive blue ocean.
It's such a powerful example of how those 4 questions can reshape an industry. Is
Yeah.
there a tool to help make sure you actually address all 4?
Yeah, there's a supplementary tool called the Eliminate, Reduce, Raise, Create grid. It's just a simple 4-quadrant grid.
And you just fill in the boxes for what you plan to do under each heading.
Exactly. It forces you to explicitly consider all 4 actions. Helps avoid the trap of only focusing on raising and creating, which can just add cost and complexity.
Or only eliminating and reducing, which might just make you a niche, low-cost player without broad appeal.
Right. It pushes for that simultaneous pursuit of differentiation and low cost, and it makes you really scrutinize the industry's assumptions. If we put Cirque du Soleil back on that grid, eliminate animals, stars, multiple rings, reduce traditional humor, maybe some of the overt thrill danger aspects, raise the venue quality, the price point, create the theme, the artistic music dance, multiple productions.
Seeing it in the grid makes the whole strategic shift really stark and clear.
It does. Okay, so let's say you've used the canvas, applied the 4 actions, maybe filled out the grid. You have a potential strategy. How do you know if it's actually a good one? A strong blue ocean strategy.
Yeah, how do you evaluate it?
The authors suggest looking back at your value curve on the strategy canvas. A compelling blue ocean strategy typically has 3 essential qualities. First is focus.
Focus.
Your strategy and your value curve should clearly show focus. You're not trying to excel across all factors of competition. You're concentrating your efforts on a few key factors that deliver exceptional value. Think Southwest Airlines focusing intensely on just 3 things: friendly service, speed, and frequent point-to-point departures.
And they didn't try to match the majors on meals, lounges, interline baggage?
Exactly. That focus keeps their costs down and their value proposition clear. Second quality, divergence.
Divergence, meaning it has to look different.
Fundamentally different. The shape of your value curve must diverge from the competitors. If it just looks like theirs, but maybe a bit higher or lower across the board, you're likely still trapped in the red ocean, just competing incrementally. Southwest's point-to-point model was radically divergent from the hub-and-spoke system everyone else used.
Okay, focus, divergence, and the third.
A compelling tagline. A good blue ocean strategy should lend itself to a clear, concise, authentic tagline that speaks directly to buyers and captures the essence of the value proposition.
Like Southwest's, the speed of a plane at the price of a car, whenever you need it.
Perfect example. If you struggle to articulate your strategy in a simple, powerful tagline that resonates, it might be a warning sign. Maybe it's too complex, internally focused, or not offering clear value. Cirque du Soleil is maybe harder to capture in one phrase, which reflects its unique blend, but its message of reinventing the circus was clear.
And conversely, looking at the value curve can also signal problems.
Yes, the book points out several warning signs. A value curve that's high on everything suggests a lack of focus and probably a high cost structure. A curve that mimics competitors signals a Me Too strategy, stuck in the red ocean.
No clear tagline might mean it's innovation for its own sake, not market-driven.
Right. Or maybe the curve shows strategic contradictions trying to be low cost and high on everything. Or it's full of industry jargon showing it's internally focused, not buyer focused. These patterns on the canvas can reveal weaknesses in the strategy.
Okay, so we have tools to diagnose, tools to reconstruct, and ways to evaluate. But how do you systematically find these blue ocean opportunities in the first place? Where do you look?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it leads to the first major principle the book lays out for actually formulating a blue ocean strategy. It's called reconstruct market boundaries.
Reconstruct market boundaries, okay.
This principle directly tackles what the authors call search risk, the risk of just not finding commercially viable blue ocean ideas out there.
So how do you reduce that risk?
They offer the 6 paths framework. These are 6 systematic approaches to looking across the conventional boundaries that typically define industries and limit how companies think about competition and value.
So challenging the assumptions that keep companies locked in the red ocean.
Exactly. And none of these paths require some kind of special predictive foresight. It's more about looking at familiar data and market realities through a different lens. We'll just touch on the first 3 paths today, as they're covered early in the book.
Okay, path number 1.
Path 1. Look across alternative industries. The idea here is simple but powerful. Companies compete not just with others in their own industry, but also with companies in other industries that offer alternatives.
Alternatives, meaning different products or services that fulfill the same basic need or function.
Precisely. Like your example earlier, a restaurant versus a cinema for a night out. Different form, different function, but they serve a similar purpose. Buyers implicitly weigh these alternatives all the time.
But companies often just focus on rivals within their own defined industry box.
Right. The opportunity lies in that space between alternative industries. Understand why customers choose one alternative over another, capture the key factors driving that choice, and then eliminate or reduce everything else.
And NetJets is a great example here, right? Looking across commercial airlines and buying your own private jet.
Perfect example. They saw companies chose commercial airlines mainly for cost, despite the hassles, wasted time, security lines.
And they chose owning a private jet for speed, convenience, flexibility, reaching more airports.
Yeah.
But the cost was astronomical, plus the management headache.
So NetJets looked at why people traded up or down. They created fractional jet ownership, giving you the key benefits of a private jet, the speed, the convenience, the access, but at a dramatically lower cost than full ownership, more comparable to first or business class commercial travel. They found a blue ocean between those 2 alternatives.
Another one mentioned is NTT Docomo's iMode in Japan, looking across mobile phones and the internet.
Yeah, back when mobile phones were just for calls and the internet was mostly on clunky PCs. The internet had info, but was hard to access on the go. Phones were mobile, but disconnected.
So iMode.
Combine the key benefits. Mobile access like a phone, but with simple access to essential internet stuff. Email, weather, news headlines, simple games. Crucially, they eliminated the internet's downsides for the mass market. High PC cost, complexity, difficult billing. They use the phone bill.
Making the mobile internet easy and accessible for the first time for many.
Exactly. World's first mass-adopted mobile internet service. Huge blue ocean, created by looking across those alternatives.
Okay, that's path 1. Look across alternatives. What's path 2?
Path 2. Look across strategic groups within industries. Strategic groups are clusters of companies within the same industry that pursue similar strategies, often built around price and performance tiers.
Like luxury car brands versus economy car brands.
No.
Or maybe full-service department stores versus discount retailers.
Exactly. Companies usually benchmark themselves against and compete fiercely with others within their own strategic group. They tend to ignore what's happening in other groups.
So the opportunity here is
Understand why customers trade up to a higher group or trade down to a lower one. What factors drive that choice? Then build a strategy that captures the key advantages of different groups while eliminating or reducing the rest.
Curves, the women's fitness company, seems like a good fit here.
Perfect example. They looked across traditional full-service health clubs, typically higher priced, lots of amenities, often co-ed, requiring significant time commitment.
And they looked across the alternative of home exercise programs, low cost, private, but maybe lacking motivation or structure.
Right. They saw women traded up to gyms for the structure, the motivation, the social aspect, but were often put off by the cost, the time, the gym scene, maybe feeling intimidated. They traded down to home exercise for cost, convenience, privacy, but often lacked follow-through.
So curves combine the best of both worlds.
Pretty much. They offered the motivation and structure of a group setting, the 30-minute circuit, the camaraderie and privacy of a women-only space with few mirrors, but at a low cost, and with the time convenience closer to home exercise.
And they eliminated all the expensive extras. Tools, juice bars, tons of different machines.
All gone. They focused only on what mattered to their target non-customers, the huge group of women who weren't comfortable in traditional gyms and struggled to exercise consistently at home. Massive blue ocean.
Okay, so path 1 is across alternate industries. Path 2 is across strategic groups within an industry. What's path 3?
Path 3. Look across the chain of buyers. Industries often converge on targeting a specific group within the buying chain. Maybe they focus primarily on the purchaser, like the procurement department, or the user, the person actually using the product, or the influencer, like a doctor recommending a drug.
But the actual buyer is often a whole chain of people, and they might value different things.
Exactly. The opportunity here is to challenge the industry's conventional wisdom about who the target buyer should be. Shifting focus to a previously overlooked group in the chain can reveal completely new value propositions.
Novo Nordisk and insulin comes to mind here. The industry focused on doctors.
Right, the key influencers. And the main competitive factor was insulin purity. But Novo realized that purity had reached a point of diminishing returns. The real unmet need wasn't with the doctors, it was with the users, the patients themselves.
What were the patient's problems?
The daily hassle and embarrassment of injections, carrying around vials, syringes, the difficulty of getting the dose right, especially if visually impaired, the social stigma. Many wouldn't inject outside their home because it was inconvenient and awkward.
So Novo shifted focus.
From the doctor's definition of value, purity, to the patient's definition, ease of use, convenience, discretion. They created the Novo pen.
Like a fountain pen holding an insulin cartridge.
Exactly. Easy to carry, simple click dose mechanism, much less stigma. They basically designed the insulin delivery system around the patient's life, not just the clinical need. They followed up with pre-filled disposable pens, making it even simpler.
And that transformed their business.
Completely. They went from being primarily an insulin manufacturer to a diabetes care company. Their pen devices took over, creating a blue ocean based on user convenience and making them a global leader.
The book also mentions Bloomberg doing something similar, shifting focus from the IT managers who bought the terminals
to the financial traders and analysts who actually use the information and tools day to day. By focusing on the user's needs for speed, functionality, and relevant data, they created tremendous value that justified their premium price, even if the IT managers initially balked.
So these first 3 paths, looking across alternatives, strategic groups, and buyer chains, they offer concrete ways to start thinking differently and searching for those blue ocean spaces.
They really do. They provide systematic pathways to challenge industry boundaries. And remember, these are just the first 3 of the 6 paths the book outlines for reconstructing market boundaries.
And reconstructing boundaries is just the first principle for formulating strategy.
Right. The book actually lays out 8 principles in total. 4 for strategy formulation. The 6 paths address the first principle, reconstructing boundaries. And then there are principles about focusing on the big picture, reaching beyond existing demand, and getting the strategic sequence right, ensuring utility, price, cost, and adoption hurdles are addressed. These 4 principles help mitigate the key risks in formulating a strategy: search risk, planning risk, scale risk, and business model risk.
So it's not just about the idea, but making sure the idea is actually viable and scalable.
Exactly. And then there are 4 principles for strategy execution, because having a great idea isn't enough if you can't implement it.
What do those cover?
Things like overcoming key organizational hurdles politics, resistance to change, building execution into the strategy from the start, often using principles of fair process, aligning the 3 propositions: the value proposition for customers, the profit proposition for the company, and the people proposition for your employees. And finally, understanding how to renew blue oceans over time, because even blue oceans can eventually become red.
So those execution principles tackle risks like organizational risk, management risk, sustainability risk.
And renewal risk, yeah. It really paints a picture of blue ocean strategy as a holistic, repeatable process, covering both finding the opportunity and making it happen.
It's definitely more than just a brainstorming session. It's presented as a robust, discipline.
Absolutely. It aims to make the pursuit of new market space as systematic and manageable as competing in established markets.
Okay, so wrapping up this first deep dive into blue ocean strategy, the main takeaway for me is just how powerful this shift in perspective can be. Moving from fighting over inches in a crowded space.
To creating whole new landscapes of value. It's about breaking free from the competition by making it less relevant.
And importantly, it's not just wishful thinking. There are concrete tools and systematic ways to approach this. The strategy canvas, the 4 actions, the 6 paths.
It's about actively reconstructing market boundaries, focusing on that value innovation, that leaps in value for buyers and the company by looking beyond current customers and competitors.
So, maybe the final thought for you listening is, take a moment to think about your own world, your industry, your organization. Where are those red oceans you see or feel? That intense competition, the shrinking margins.
And based on just these initial ideas, we've talked about the canvas, the 4 actions, looking across alternatives or strategic groups or buyer chains. What's maybe the first spark, the first possibility you can see for creating a little bit of blue ocean space? Where might that opportunity lie?
Thanks for listening. Visit our library and subscribe below for more book summaries. This has been a Sprint Reads production.